What if a simple, ordinary moment could unravel your entire life? It started with a chance meeting, a familiar face from the past sparking a chain of secrets I thought I could control. But while I was tangled in deception, my husband was quietly piecing everything together, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. This is a story of betrayal, hidden truths, and a revenge so calculated that it changed everything. How far can one lie go before it all comes crashing down? I was at the grocery store, pushing my cart aimlessly down the brightly lit aisles, when I saw someone who made me freeze for a moment. There he was, my ex-boyfriend, someone I hadn't seen in years, casually browsing a shelf. It felt like a scene straight out of a movie. Something so ordinary yet so surreal in that instant. My heart skipped a beat as memories of a younger, freer version of myself flooded back. Our eyes met, and he smiled, that familiar smile that once made me fall for him. He walked over casually, and before I knew it, we were chatting like old friends who had simply lost touch over time. It was strange how the past came rushing back so effortlessly, as if the years between us had disappeared. Hearing his voice again brought a strange comfort I hadn't expected. As the conversation unfolded, I felt torn between nostalgia and reality. He seemed more mature, yet the same charm that had drawn me to him years ago still lingered. We talked about the past, shared a few laughs, and recalled moments that felt trivial back then but carried an odd weight now. Time seemed to stand still, but eventually, my mundane routine called me back to the present. We said goodbye quickly, almost nonchalantly, but the impact of that encounter stayed with me as I finished my shopping. Driving home, my mind wandered, replaying who I was back then and who I had become. Something inside me stirred, something I hadn't realized was still there. And in the silence of that drive, I knew this story was just beginning. It started innocently enough, a message that popped up late one evening. "It was nice seeing you today," he wrote. I hesitated, staring at the screen for longer than I should have before typing back a casual, "You too." That small exchange should have ended there, but it didn't. One message turned into another, and soon we were exchanging quick notes during breaks at work or while I was waiting for the coffee to brew. At first, it felt harmless, like catching up with an old friend. We joked about shared memories like the time we got lost on a road trip or the inside jokes only we could understand. But gradually, the tone began to shift. His words became softer, more personal, laced with a familiarity that felt both comforting and dangerous. I told myself it was just nostalgia. I started waiting for his messages, checking my phone more often than usual. His attention felt like a lifeline on the days that dragged on endlessly. There was a thrill in the secrecy, a spark in every notification. I justified it to myself. After all, it wasn't as if I was doing anything wrong. We were just talking. Flirting wasn't crossing the line. Was it? But something in me knew there was a weight to this connection. Something more than friendly banter. Each time I sent a reply, I felt a tiny pang of guilt, but it was quickly replaced by the rush of excitement. And in the back of my mind, I couldn't help but wonder where this was all leading. It started subtly, so small that even I didn't notice it at first. My husband would ask about my day, and I'd respond with vague, short answers, my mind already preoccupied. When he reached out for a hug, I found myself pulling away, using tiredness or a deadline as an excuse. I told myself it was nothing, just a phase. But deep down I knew the truth. He began to notice, of course. He wasn't oblivious. "You've been quiet lately," he said one evening, his voice tinged with concern. I brushed it off with a weak smile and the usual, "Just tired." But his questions didn't stop there. They lingered in the air, unspoken yet heavy, each one probing closer to a place I wasn't ready to face. At night, lying next to him, I'd feel a strange emptiness. I could sense his unease, his attempts to connect, but I couldn't meet him halfway. My thoughts were elsewhere, with someone else, replaying words and moments that felt far more vivid than anything happening in our shared life. The guilt was there, faint but persistent, a quiet drumbeat I tried to ignore. And yet I found ways to justify it. After all, wasn't I still here, still fulfilling my role as his wife? He didn't know the difference. Or at least I told myself he didn't. But the distance between us was growing, an invisible wall building brick by brick. I wasn't sure how much longer it would stay standing. Felt like crossing an invisible line. When he suggested we meet for coffee, my heart raced in a way that I hadn't felt in years. I hesitated at first, but the excitement overpowered the caution. I told my husband I had an errand to run and quickly left, my palms damp as I gripped the steering wheel. The cafe felt like neutral ground, safe, ordinary, but my pulse told a different story. When I saw him waiting, that familiar smile tugging at the corner of his mouth, my stomach flipped. We sat at a small table by the window, the kind of place where strangers would think we were just two friends catching up. But beneath the surface, the energy was unmistakable. Every glance, every word, carried a weight that no one else could see. We talked for what felt like hours, though I barely remember what was said. It was the way he leaned in, the way his hand brushed mine when he reached for his cup, the way his gaze lingered just a moment too long. I tried to convince myself it was innocent, that it was just two people reconnecting. But I knew better. Driving home, the guilt hit me in waves. My husband's face flashed in my mind, followed by the memory of his voice asking if I'd be home for dinner. I rehearsed my excuse, but it felt flimsy, almost rehearsed. The scent of coffee and the faint trace of his cologne lingered in the car, a reminder of the line I had just crossed. The moment I walked through the door, I knew something was off. My husband's eyes flicked up from the book he was pretending to read, lingering on me a second too long. I smiled a little too bright and tossed my bag onto the chair. "Busy day," I said, hoping my voice sounded steady. He nodded, but the way his gaze trailed me made my chest tighten. It was something small, a detail I had overlooked, a faint trace of perfume on my scarf that wasn't mine or a smudge of lipstick I hadn't noticed in the car mirror. "You're wearing that scent again?" he asked, his tone casual but his eyes sharp. My heart skipped. I laughed it off, mumbling something about trying a new sample, but his expression didn't change. The tension hung between us as I went about my evening routine. I could feel his eyes following me, his silence louder than any question he could have asked. I fumbled through a conversation about dinner plans and work emails, trying to seem unaffected. But inside I was unraveling. Did he know? Or was my paranoia playing tricks on me? That night, as we lay in bed, his breathing was steady, but I knew he wasn't asleep. I stared at the ceiling, replaying every step of my day, every word I had said. My mind raced with a single thought. If he didn't suspect something now, it was only a matter of time. Balancing two worlds wasn't as easy as I thought it would be. Every day felt like walking a tightrope, trying to keep everything intact while my mind constantly drifted elsewhere. At home, I played the part of the devoted wife, cooking dinner, making small talk, and laughing at my husband's jokes. But inside, I was a whirlwind of anxiety and distraction. The messages became harder to hide. A forgotten notification left open on my phone almost betrayed me one evening. My husband's curious glance lingered a second too long before I quickly swiped it away. "Work," I muttered, avoiding his gaze. The lie came out too easily, but the guilt didn't. It was there, heavy and undeniable, like a weight I couldn't shake off. Even my routines began to slip. I mixed up dates, showed up late to meetings, and once forgot an important anniversary at work, a mistake that left my boss fuming. It was as if the lines between my two lives were blurring, and the cracks were becoming harder to patch. Each small mistake felt like a countdown to something I wasn't ready to face. I told myself I could manage it, that I was in control. But every time my phone buzzed or I saw my husband's questioning eyes, I felt the walls closing in. I knew I couldn't keep this up forever. Something had to give, and the thought of what might come next made my chest tighten. It was bound to happen eventually, but I didn't expect it to be this way. The air in the house had shifted lately, quieter but heavier. My husband was saying less, but observing more. One evening, I caught him glancing at my phone. his expression unreadable. I brushed it off, but my stomach churned. Something wasn't right. I didn't notice when he became so meticulous, but he started asking subtle questions, casual yet pointed. "Didn't you have a meeting last Tuesday?" he asked while scrolling through a shared calendar. I laughed nervously, offering a vague explanation, but his eyes didn't waver. Each question felt like a piece of a puzzle he was quietly assembling. Then he found it. A receipt from a dinner I couldn't explain, or a message I forgot to delete. His face was calm, eerily calm, as if he had been waiting for this moment. I saw him linger over the evidence, his expression darkening, and my heart sank. He didn't confront me right away, which was somehow worse. Instead, he closed his laptop and went about his night as though nothing had happened. That silence was unbearable. I kept expecting a confrontation, a shout, or even an accusation, but it never came. It felt like he was waiting for the perfect moment to strike, and I had no idea when or how it would happen. Every moment felt like borrowed time, and the suspense was slowly unraveling me. Just when I thought the tension had reached its peak, he surprised me. "Let's take some time for ourselves," he said one evening, his tone warm, almost tender. I froze for a moment, unsure of how to respond. Was this a trap? Or had he decided to move past whatever doubts he had? He smiled, and for a moment I let myself believe it. He planned everything, down to the smallest detail. A romantic dinner at my favorite restaurant, soft candlelight reflecting in his eyes, and even a bouquet of the flowers he used to bring me when we first met. It felt like the old days, and I wanted so badly to trust this version of him, to lean into the comfort of familiarity. But something about it didn't sit right. Throughout the evening, he was attentive in a way I hadn't felt in years. He laughed at my stories, held my hand across the table, and even suggested we plan a weekend getaway. Yet, there was an edge to his kindness, a precision to his gestures that felt calculated. I couldn't shake the feeling that he was playing a game I didn't know the rules to. As the night ended, he pulled me close, whispering about how much he loved me. His words sent a shiver down my spine. Not the good kind, but the kind that leaves you looking over your shoulder. Whatever this was, it wasn't just reconciliation. It was something else entirely, and I wasn't sure I wanted to find out what came next. I wasn't prepared for it. In fact, I had started convincing myself that maybe, just maybe, we were on the path to repairing things. But then, in the middle of a dinner with friends, he dropped the bomb. It was subtle at first. A carefully placed comment about trust, loyalty, and secrets that can't stay hidden forever. My stomach flipped. The room fell silent as everyone's eyes darted between us. I tried to laugh it off, but my voice wavered. Then he pulled out his phone and, with a calmness that sent chills down my spine, showed the evidence. Screenshots of messages, timestamps, receipts. He didn't yell or accuse. He didn't have to. The look on his face was enough to make the walls close in on me. The silence was deafening as our friends exchanged awkward glances. I could feel my face burn as the weight of his actions sunk in. This wasn't just about confronting me. It was a public unveiling, calculated and precise. He didn't shout or make a scene. Instead, he let the evidence speak for itself, leaving me scrambling for words that wouldn't come. As he excused himself from the table, leaving me sitting there in stunned silence, I realized this was only the beginning. His calm demeanor, his carefully orchestrated revelation, it all pointed to one thing. This wasn't just about betrayal. This was about revenge, and he had only just begun. I underestimated him completely. He wasn't just hurt. He had been planning his next move all along. The first clue came when I received a notice from the bank. An account I thought was ours had been closed. The balance moved somewhere I couldn't access. Then came the lawyer's letter, cold and unyielding, outlining the terms of a divorce I hadn't even realized he had started. He didn't stop there. He left no loose ends, no room for negotiation. The house, the car, the savings. It was all meticulously protected, and I was left grasping at straws. Even my connection to the man I thought I had turned to for comfort was severed. My husband had sent him the messages, ensuring the affair ended with the same precision that dismantled our marriage. Every move was so deliberate, so calculated, that it left me breathless. He wasn't just taking everything away. He was showing me that he had been in control all along. Each decision, each piece of evidence he shared, felt like a final nail in the coffin of the life I thought I had. There was no shouting, no dramatic confrontation, just the quiet, relentless execution of his plan. In the end, I was left standing in the wreckage of my choices, unsure of what to feel. Anger, guilt, regret. He had taken everything but left me with one undeniable truth. I had betrayed him, but he had mastered the art of turning that betrayal into a power I never saw coming.
Keep watching our stories by clicking on one of the videos that appear on the screen, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications to be alerted about new videos. See you next time.